Hello everybody and welcome to week 4 of the audiobooks series. So this is our 4th episode, and this week I wanted to do a Shakespeare theme. So we're going to have a week off from the books that we've been looking at, or the new books, and we're just going to do Shakespeare this week. And the plan is for me to show you some things I have collected over the years of Shakespeare, books and programmes, plays and information. And some of these things have been given to me as well as gifts from friends, and some I bought during my time in Stratford-upon-Avon when I have visited. So Stratford-upon-Avon is where Shakespeare was born, and he also lived there in his early life and his later life. In between that time, he lived in London. So I'm just going to bring a picture of Shakespeare while I tell you some information about him. So it was Shakespeare's birthday on Thursday, which was the 23rd of April, and he would have been 456 years old. So it was his 456th birthday. And I've also done Shakespeare themed classes as well in acting this week for our online classes. And if you haven't taken part in the classes and would like to, please just get in contact and I can share that link with you. So because it's a Shakespeare theme in acting, I wanted to also do that with the audiobooks, just to link it in. So this is Shakespeare. They don't think that this is the most accurate picture of him. They think the most accurate picture of him is this. They think this is what Shakespeare really looked like, because there's a few different versions of how people painted him, and the historians think that this one is the most accurate. And I think it hangs in the National Gallery in London, and you can go and have a look at it. But this is one I have, and if this is accurate, and it must be because it is used on quite a lot of material, then I would say this was Shakespeare in his later days. So yes, so he was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, which is just outside of London, and he had a mother called Mary, and he had a father called John. If you have done our online classes, I have given this information on the online classes, so apologies if it's being repeated. I think he had 5 siblings. I would need to Google that. That is off the top of my head. He had 5 siblings, I think. He went on to get married when he was 18 years old, and he married a lady called Anne Hathaway, and he had 3 children with her. He had a child called Susanna, which was the oldest, and then he had twins, and his twins were called Hamnet and Judith. And unfortunately, Hamnet died when he was 11. And later on in his life, in his 20s, he went to live in London because he was doing a lot of writing by this point. So he wanted to seek his fame and fortune. So he went to London, and the person that gave him his big break was Queen Elizabeth I, which is Henry VIII's daughter. And she used to go and watch his plays, and she used to give him money as well to put plays on. So that is actually who gave him his kind of big break, which is quite fascinating, I think. So he used to put plays on at the Rose Theatre and also on at the Globe Theatre. Now, the Rose Theatre is no longer there, but they are excavating the Rose Theatre, and I've actually been to have a look at the excavation in London, and it's wonderful because it is building that is over 400 years old that is being excavated so that they can see what the theatre space looked like, because they know for a fact that he put plays on in that space. I think actually some of his very first plays that were performed in London were performed at the Rose Theatre. And close by is the Globe, and the Globe Theatre was quite famous and quite popular at the time. But one day there was a play happening at the Globe Theatre, and it involved some fire. But unfortunately, the fire caught onto some of the straw in the Globe Theatre and it burnt down. So it was completely demolished, unfortunately. But since then, they have rebuilt the Globe Theatre on the same spot, and they've built a replica, which means the same as the old Globe. And you can go and watch plays there, and they do put a lot of Shakespearean plays on. I went to watch a play there, and I went to see A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was in the groundlings bit, which is where you stand so you don't have a seat. So in Shakespearean times, there was a lot of people that would watch his plays in the groundlings area, and you had to stand, and you have to stand for a really long time. So I think I was standing for 3 hours when I was watching A Midsummer Night's Dream. But it was worth it because it was really, really, really good. So you can go and you can visit, and I will put the information in the description box below. So he put plays on in London. He made a really good name for himself, and he made some money as well. Then later on he came back to Stratford-upon-Avon, and he died in Stratford-upon-Avon, and there is a church called the Holy Trinity Church, and Shakespeare is buried inside that church, and again in Stratford-upon-Avon, and you can visit his grave. So I have been to Stratford-upon-Avon quite a few times now, and I have visited his grave, and it's absolutely fascinating. So if you ever want to go and visit, it's a highly recommended place. It's a beautiful place to visit, and there's so much to do. You can visit his mother's cottage, which is still there. You can visit around Stratford-upon-Avon to learn about his life. His school is still there, and I'm going to show you a picture. His school building is still there, and the actual room hasn't changed very much. So I'll show you a picture of that in a second. There's loads of tours you can do, loads of sights to see. There's the River Avon as well, which is beautiful if you wanted to maybe go on a boat ride somewhere. There's the RSC, which is the Royal Shakespeare Company, so you can actually watch a piece of theatre while you're in Stratford-upon-Avon as well. And there's beautiful restaurants. It's just a gorgeous place to go, especially in the summertime. So maybe that could be put on your future list if it's something that you would be interested in. Now, also to point out, he wrote plays and he also wrote poetry. His plays were split into 3 different themes. So he used to write comedies, tragedies, and history plays. He wrote 154 sonnets, and that is a poem. I think it's a 14-lined poem, and certain lines rhyme as well throughout the poem. So there's 154 of them to read. So let's have a little look inside here. I thought I would show you some different bits and bobs. I bought this when I went to Stratford-upon-Avon. This shows a painting of a Shakespearean festival that took place in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1769. So that's a long time after William Shakespeare. I must tell you the dates that he lived and died as well. So this is the cottage that I mentioned before, which is Shakespeare's mum's cottage, Mary. This is Shakespeare's signature or autograph. You can visit the house that Shakespeare was born in, which is here. So this room here was the father's workplace, and I think he used to make shoes and boots. And Shakespeare was born in the bedroom above, which is this. So you can actually visit the bedroom, which is again fascinating. This is the River Avon that I mentioned. This is the schoolroom that I mentioned to you. So this is where Shakespeare would have gone to school. The desks are not original desks, but the room is. So the room's hardly been touched. So that's what it would have looked like when Shakespeare went to school. This is what the school looks like outside. So this is Elizabeth I that I mentioned to you. And she's the lady that, well, she's the queen that gave Shakespeare his big break really in London. And she was a really big fan of his work. And if you've seen the film Shakespeare in Love, which has got Gwyneth Paltrow in, it shows a scene where Elizabeth comes to watch one of the plays. So this is a cottage, and it's Anne Hathaway's cottage, which was Shakespeare's wife. This is where she was born and where she grew up. This is a map of London, what it would have looked like when Shakespeare went. So this is the Rose Theatre, which I was mentioning to you before, which is currently being excavated. And I did visit the excavation. I actually went to see a play. I went to see Othello as well when I was there, because they do run it as a theatre as well. And then you can kind of look down into the excavation process and see what they have done. So that's what it would have looked like in Shakespeare's day. And they know for a fact that Shakespeare put his plays on there. So here is another map, and so there's the Rose Theatre that we've just looked at, and then here is the Globe. It looks very, very different now. So there's the River Thames. There's St Paul's Cathedral, which is still there today. But this is what London would have looked like when Shakespeare was there. So there's lots and lots of green. It doesn't look like that now. It's much, much more busier with more buildings and lots of businesses. But the Globe was rebuilt and is here if you want to visit. So these are the gardens at New Place, which was the last house that Shakespeare lived in when he came back to Stratford-upon-Avon. And these are the gardens. That house that he lived in, the last house, is no longer there. It was demolished in 1700s, which is such a shame. So this is the Globe now. This is the new globe that was built. That's what it looks like from the outside. So that's just a few little bits and bobs about Shakespeare's time at Stratford and in London, and some of the buildings that are still standing. Okay, so I wanted to show you the year that William Shakespeare was born and the year that he died. So this is his family tree, and at the top you've got his dad and his mum, and he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 siblings, so I was a little bit wrong. 7 siblings. They didn't all live very long, so you've got Joan, which is the oldest, and they think she lived for a year. There's a question mark on the year that she died. Margaret only lived for a year. William was the 3rd oldest of the children, and then you have his other siblings who did live fairly lengthy times. This is William Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway, and then it shows you their 3 children. So you've got Susanna, who was the oldest, then Hamnet, who died when he was 11, then Judith, and then it shows you that Judith married somebody called Thomas Quinney, and Susanna married someone called John Hall. So Shakespeare had 4 grandchildren. He had 1, which was Elizabeth, 2, which was Shakespeare, 3, which was Richard, and 4, which was Thomas. But none of them had children. So this is where Shakespeare's direct family tree, his direct family, stop. So he doesn't have any living descendants today. However, his sister Joan, she does have living descendants with us today, somewhere in the world. So somewhere in the world there are people related to William Shakespeare. This week's episode of the audiobooks is for our older and younger children. So I'm not doing 2 separate videos, I'm just going to do the one this week because it'll be great for you both to watch the same one. So these are theatre programmes. So when I was a student and studying acting, I worked at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, and it was one of the best jobs I ever had because I got to work in that theatre space, which is one of my favourite theatre spaces ever. It is theatre in the round, so you sit in the round when you watch any plays. It's in a beautiful building, one of my favourite buildings of all time. And if you've never visited the Royal Exchange Theatre, I would absolutely put that on your list because it is amazing. And I worked there for about 6 years when I was a student, and many plays were put on in the building, and some of them were Shakespeare plays, and these are programmes that I have kept from when they were on at the time, and I thought I would show them to you just so you can see what a Shakespeare programme would look like now when people put them on. So this one is Henry V, and it's one of his history plays. So do you remember I said that he does comedies, tragedies and history plays? So this is one of his history plays because Henry V is a real person that was part of history. So inside the programme you will see some other plays that are happening, and then it gives you the information of the actors and who's playing which characters. So the person playing Henry V is Elliot Cohen. He's playing King Henry V. Then it just gives you some information on Henry V and Shakespeare's plays. Gives you pictures, trees, history trees. And then we get to the actors, and it shows us all the different actors that are in the cast, what parts they're playing, and information on work that the actors have done. So this is a big cast, this one. Then it gives you some information on all the people that work in the theatre and the jobs. And I'm actually on here. So I worked in front of house when I worked in the theatre, and my name is there. So if you worked in the building, they would also put your name in the programme, which I thought was fantastic. Now, this next one, this was one of my favourite plays that I ever seen at the Royal Exchange Theatre. So, this is the Tempest, and this will be definitely a play that you will study, because I know they use it quite a lot on the national curriculum, especially in high school, because it's one that is a bit easier to understand. So it's the Tempest, and I think it's a tragedy. This will be a tragedy play. So Henry V was the history. This would be a tragedy play. And it had Pete Postlethwaite in the cast. So he played Prospero, which is the lead part. Now, Pete Postlethwaite is a Hollywood actor. He's from England, but he's been in a lot of Hollywood films. So if you've ever seen Jurassic Park, he was in that. He was also in The Usual Suspects, which would be a film for grown-ups. He was in that with Kevin Spacey. He was also in the Romeo and Juliet film with Leonardo DiCaprio. He played the friar, the priest. So he's in that as well. So he's done a lot of really high profile work. So it was really nice to see him around the building. And I've got a funny story about him actually, because before he became an actor, he was a teacher. And during this time when the play was on, a lot of schools were coming to visit the theatre to watch the play, because they would have been studying it in school, and then they would come and watch it in the theatre. And one school came to watch it, and I was working in the theatre this night, and they were making a lot of noise, and at the interval, Pete Postlethwaite came and told the school off, so told the class off, and they then came back into the theatre and didn't make any noise after he told them off. So that's the teacher in him, wanting people to do the right thing and sit in the theatre space and be respectful of the actors and what is happening. So that's a bit of a funny story. I actually got him to sign this programme as well. I'm not sure where. Oh, I know. I think it's... So he signed the programme. Pete Postlethwaite. So this programme is exactly the same as Henry V. So we have some adverts, then we get to the cast. It tells you the cast. Gives you some information on Shakespeare. Gives you some information on the Tempest, previous productions of the Tempest. Lots of magic in this play as well. That's the cast, information on the cast. So that's the Tempest programme. So I wanted to share that with you because that was a special time in my life when I worked at the theatre. It's because it's a theatre in the round, there is no backstage. So when the actors were coming out from the stage, you would see them, you would see the costume department walking around, people doing makeup. So it was really special to work there, and I've got really fond memories of my time there, all the different plays I got to see, all the different actors I got to see and meet. I met a lot of different actors there, some really high profile actors as well. And it was good as well because I used to work the techs, and I would see how the directors would work with the actors and also the lighting and the sound. So I'll put some information on the Royal Exchange Theatre in the description box below, because you must go and visit that theatre if you haven't, because it really is a treat. So this beautiful book was bought for me by my friend Cara, and she is a very big Shakespeare fan, and she did a 2-year degree on Shakespeare and his work. So inside there is lots of different information. I won't go through it page by page, but I'll just have a quick flick so you can see. And it just gives you some history on the Elizabethan time, which is when Shakespeare lived, how they lived, what Stratford would have looked like in the Shakespearean times, the Elizabethan times. So Shakespeare's London, what that would have looked like. It's a book just filled with loads and loads of information. I will actually show you this picture, which is the Rose Theatre when it is being excavated, which is where I told you I went to watch the play. And that's what it looks like. So we have the comedy plays, we have the history plays, and we have the tragedy plays. And that's a picture of Ian McKellen, who plays Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. That's him playing Macbeth, which is one of the tragedy plays. So there's lots and lots of different information in this book. To get you up to speed. Shakespeare Films. So these are pictures of films. So where they've taken the Shakespeare plays and turned it into a film. So I mentioned the Romeo and Juliet film, which had got Pete Postlethwaite in it. And this is a still caption of the film. There's Leonardo DiCaprio. So that is that gorgeous book. And my friend Cara also got me this Shakespeare book as well. And it's the Oxford Companion to Shakespeare. And again, there's a message, it says, to Melissa. Happy Christmas 2009. Love, Cara. So this book is basically a breakdown glossary of Shakespeare, of people involved in Shakespeare plays, actors and actresses that have played the parts. It's a breakdown of all the characters in every play of his. Information about the history of the plays, what the plays meant, the meaning behind the plays, pictures. There's the picture of London again. So there's a chapter for every play of Shakespeare's, and it breaks the play down and gives you lots of information on the play, pictures. So this would take a really long time to read every single bit, but it really is very informative. So that's another book that I have as a gift. This is a book that I bought, and I bought it from the Book People, and it's Shakespeare for Grown-Ups. Everything you need to know about the Bard. Now, the Bard is a nickname for Shakespeare. And inside, it just gives you lots of information that's a little bit easier to read and to follow. And it's information about his plays, about his life, about conspiracies, because there's some theories that say Shakespeare didn't write all of his work. So sometimes that does get debated. And so there's just information in here about different things, about different writers, people that lived during Shakespeare's time and were also a writer themselves. This is Christopher Marlowe, and he wrote plays, and sometimes people say that he wrote some of the Shakespeare plays. Gives you some information on women in Shakespeare's times. And at the side here it talks about life expectancy. So during Shakespeare's time, people didn't really live past the age of 30. So that gives you some information on that as well. Witchcraft, that was really big during the Elizabethan era. Some information on London. It says here for church, everyone had to regularly attend church or they would face fines. And it says here for food that potatoes were a new and exotic food, and they were brought to Europe from Spain. People didn't drink coffee or tea or eat chocolate. That's so interesting. And the sewers, the main sewer in London was the Thames, which was filled with stinking rubbish, human and commercial waste. So that was the sewage. All the waste went into the Thames. So there's lots and lots of different information in this book for adults to have a look through and read about Shakespeare. So these are copies of Shakespeare's plays, some of them, and I have them because when I was studying acting, I would have to learn speeches from the plays, and I would perform them on my courses, or I would use them for auditions. So this is The Winter's Tale. This is a tragedy. And inside is all of the lines. And also you can see I've wrote all my notes because I learnt a speech from it, from a character called Paulina. and this was the long speech I had to learn, translate, and make decisions about. So that's The Winter's Tale. The Comedy of Errors. And this has got twins in it, and the twins get mixed up and there's lots of mistaken identities. And inside I have speeches that I would have been working on. That I would have been learning. This book gives you lots of information on the Taming of the Shrew, which is another Shakespeare play that I studied, and I learnt a speech from it by Catherine. And let's have a look at this. So this was the speech I learnt and had to do all my notes on. And this just gives you information on the play so you can understand it a bit more. And they are some copies that I have of Shakespeare's plays that I have studied myself when I was acting. So this is the final thing I'm going to show you, which is the complete works of William Shakespeare. And inside is all of his plays and his poetry and his sonnets. And sonnets is poetry as well. So here you have the contents. And here is the writing inside. It's quite small. And it would take you a good while to get through this. So I bought this again when I was on an acting course when I was younger, and I used it for my studies and to read the plays that I was learning and acting from. So in Shakespeare's time, the language was a little bit different. So they spoke in Latin in the Elizabethan era, and also they wrote the English different as well, which is what you will always see with Shakespeare's writing. It can be a bit confusing because the words are different, and it's evolved quite a lot since then. So the English we speak today is a lot different to the English that Shakespeare was speaking. So if you do ever read one of his plays, you will understand what I mean, because the words are different and it doesn't always make sense. But there are books for children that adapt his writing into modern language just to explain it more and make it more accessible for you to read, so you can follow the stories and not read it in ye olde English, the old English writing. So this is the collection. So what I would like to do to finish off the audiobooks episode of this week is to read 2 sonnets for you. So I'm going to read Sonnet 18, which is a really famous sonnet of Shakespeare, and then I'm going to read a different sonnet which isn't as popular. So Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets, and sonnets are poetry. So I hope that you enjoy listening to Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou oust, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growst. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So I'm just going to explain what this sonnet means. So a lot of Shakespeare's sonnets are about love, and this one is the same. So he's talking about somebody that he loves, and he's comparing them to a summer's day. So if you think of all the beautiful things that we see on a summer's day, the sun and the way that it makes us feel because it's lovely and warm. And so he's comparing that. But he says in the sonnet that summer days don't always last, because sometimes the weather changes and it might get windy. So it says here, by chance on nature's changing course. So when nature changes our day, be it summer, winter, autumn. So he's comparing this person that he loves to a beautiful summer's day, but he's saying that summer days don't always last. In the final section of the sonnet, he is saying that his love will always last for this person that he's talking about. So even though he's comparing him to a beautiful summer day, summer days don't last, but his love will always last. Sonnet 25. Let those who are in favour with their stars of public honour and proud titles boast, whilst I, whom fortune of such triumph bars, unlooked for joy in that I honour most. Great princes favourite their fair leaves spread, but as the marigold at the sun's eye, and in themselves their pride lies buried, for at a frown they in their glory die. The painful warrior famous for fight, after 1,000 victories once foiled, is from the book of honour raised quite, and all the rest forgot for which he toiled. Then happy I, that love and am beloved, where I may not remove nor be removed. So I hope you enjoyed that. What Shakespeare is saying in here is he's talking about people who have great glory. So people that are princes, or people that have money, or people that have fought great victories and won. He's saying that that doesn't last. So you can fight these great battles and win these great wars, but after a while, people will forget about you. And he's basically saying that he hasn't got these great titles, but what he does have is people that love him and people that he loves, and that won't ever go away or be forgotten. And he's basically saying that that's more important than these great titles. So that is 2 sonnets of Shakespeare's poetry, and that is the end of our audiobooks for this week. So I really hope you've enjoyed coming down the Shakespeare path with me and sharing some things that I've collected over the years. Shakespeare is a fabulous person to get involved with if you want to know more about writing and looking at his text and the characters and the plays. And I will put some information below in the description box for you. Some of the words that we use today were created by William Shakespeare. So we are still speaking his tongue in lots and lots of ways. So I hope you enjoyed it. Next week we will go back to our books, and I will have a new book for our younger children, and our older children will be carrying on with the book we have been looking at, which is by Roald Dahl. So until next week, stay Shakespeare and keep smiling. Bye.